Thanks for joining us today. We're
Oh,
talking
thanks for having me.
with Brian Niebrugge from the Executive Director of Stewardship and the Annual Catholic Appeal at the Archdiocese of St. Louis.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me about how the ACA, as those of us in the know call it, first came about.
Well, it started actually back in 1949, and remember right, as Cardinal Ritter started a collection for the retired priests of the diocese, and it became more formal in 1954. In 1949 was the Easter Fund, and then it became the Expansion Fund. It was part of the whole effort of the diocese, as the diocese was just booming and growing to that time, and the whole area was booming and growing, building churches and schools and things across the diocese. A lot of the churches you see were built during that time. Became the Archdiocesan Development Appeal in 1972, and eventually became the Annual Catholic Appeal in 2004, I believe it was, to better reflect the mission that it has now, which is not so much the building of buildings, but the expansion, the work on the mission of the church, bringing the love and mercy of Christ to people in need across the Archdiocese and beyond through the many, many ministries of the church.
Thank you. And how did you personally get involved with the ACA?
Well, it's funny. I was working in banking actually, and had the opportunity to talk to somebody about a job in a youth ministry office for the Archdiocese, and went there for a couple of years. And then after a time, there were some financial issues, and I said, well, you probably should eliminate someone. If you're going to eliminate someone, you should probably eliminate me. I was taking care of the finances at the time, and then the position opened up at the Archdiocese and for the annual appeal in 2004, kind of about the same time, and it all worked out. Of course, no kid grows up thinking they want to do this kind of work when they grow up, but boy, I sure am glad that I got the opportunity, because I love my job here.
Fantastic. What is the planning process like for you throughout the year? Because I know that the ACA is not just 3 weekends, but it's
That's right. At any given point in time, we're really running, executing 3 different appeals. We are planning, so we've already begun planning, for instance, the 2021, we're well into planning the 2021 appeal, and looking at what that's going to look like. This year we're a little behind, actually, with the whole COVID-19. It's pushed us back a little bit. We're implementing the 2020 appeal, and we are still collecting some money and paying out grants for the 2019 appeal. And pretty soon that's going to shift over, and we'll be working on 2021 and 22. So it's a full process. We spend most of a year planning one appeal, then executing it, which is obviously the bulk of what we do. But then we have to, once the appeal is done, everybody thinks it's done, but we still have to collect all those gifts from people, and then pay out the grants to all the different agencies and ministries, parishes, run some of the grant programs that we do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, tell me more about the grants, because I'm sure folks are curious how the money is dispersed then.
The bulk of the money is dispersed. There's a process that all the agencies that receive a grant are invited to apply, and they put together an application. It's not as an extensive application as some foundations, but there is an application where they have to justify the requests for their grant. That is reviewed by a team of people at the Archdiocese. Then there is a group called the Annual Catholic Appeal Council, laymen and women and clergy from across the Archdiocese of St. Louis. After it goes to that group from internally, it goes to that council, the ACA council, who makes a final recommendation to the Archbishop, who has the final say on the grants. But it is reviewed in this way at 3 different levels by different people who are most involved in the mission of the church, employees, the council, which represents the people from outside and across the diocese. Again, making sure that the money is being used well. They go out and visit the agencies that receive grants and get to see firsthand the good work of the church going on. It's one of the great things about being involved with the appeal, Angela, is that, you know, there's plenty of bad news that comes across in the world on any given day, but people in this position and people like you too, I assume, we get to work in the church, we see this amazing amount of goodness that happens every day. It's so much bigger, so much more important than all the bad news. The bad news gets all the press and all the attention, and it can sometimes get us down if we spend too much time thinking about it. But from the things that happen through the appeal, just to individual acts of generosity and kindness and goodness, there's so much good happening, and I think it's great for people in our parishes to focus on that and think about that, and not let the bad news, overwhelm us.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been hearing from the ministries about how their year has been going this year. Do you have a sense of how COVID-19 has been affecting the different ministries that are supported?
Well, obviously, it's had a big impact. One of the biggest impacts has been over at Regina Clary, where so many of the priests got sick, and some of them passed away, very sadly. There's the reality of the Catholic Charities and their amazing outreach. The call center they put together, handling hundreds of calls every day of people needing help. Our schools learning new ways, and scholars and teachers learning new ways to teach and to learn. There is our rural parish clinic that we support, which provides health care to the uninsured poor in the rural areas of the diocese. They had to suspend their work because they weren't equipped to handle the COVID-19, but they're going to be launching again in July. And in the meantime, the medical doctor, who's also a sister there, went to Regina Clary, where as I told you earlier, the priests got a lot of the priests contracted COVID, and she quarantined herself there with those people, with those men, those men who spent their lives serving the church. She went there and lived there with them for a good while so that she could provide the kind of medical care and make sure that all the protocols and all the appropriate safety to minimize the damage and recognize the symptoms and take care of the people there so they could, when possible, avoid going to the hospital, and also identify, it really is time for this person to go to the hospital for their own good. So, again, another incredible act of generosity there on her part, and Sister Marie Paul Locker to do that. And just another reflection of the goodness that happens every day.
Yeah. And I know that the ACA itself had to change some ideas about how it was going to happen. For sure. Talk through a little bit of that.
Well, we had to, the heart of this appeal has always been a parish-based appeal. And we have so many great volunteers and pastors who talk about the appeal. They recognize the importance of what it is. In a lot of dioceses, I don't want to denigrate anybody else, but a lot of dioceses, the bishop's appeal, like what we have here, it's a mandatory goal, right? You have to get this, or the money goes to the diocese anyway. Or there's an incentive, or I should say an incentive to the parish. If they go over goal, then that money comes back to the parish. We don't do any of that here. Here, the whole thing is, if you want to give money to your parish, that's a great thing and a good thing, and you should do that. The appeal is different. It supports the ministry of the church. And so it becomes incumbent upon us to make sure that the ministries that it's supporting are worthy of people's gifts and worthy of people's support. And then it also is our job to make sure that the pastors and our parish chairs and volunteers and ultimately our parishioners and donors know that, so they want to make that gift, and as a result, it becomes one of the most successful appeals of its kind in the nation. So with that background, had this confidence that even though we had to change things, even though we had to push it back to June, the main phase, even though we don't have our parishioners together in the pews like we've had in the past, that our pastors who believe in the mission of the appeal, our volunteers who believe in the mission of the appeal, and our donors who believe in the mission of the appeal are going to continue to come through and support the appeal. So we've gone to more direct solicitation, less focus on the pledge card table in the back of church after Mass. We've sent more direct pledge cards to people. We focused more on our website, our microsite, which is if I may say it, aca.archstl.org.
And I'll put that link in the comments as well, so people.
Yeah, thank you. That people can visit that to learn more about what the appeal does. There's a video on there from the Archbishop Carlson talking about the importance of the appeal even in the midst of this pandemic. And actually, hopefully soon, I hope to have a video there from Archbishop Designate Rosansky as well, talking about why this is important. So there's been more of this direct communication, and our parishes have had to pivot or change their way of approaching it. We've had to change it. But I'll tell you, Angela, despite the many changes, I've had more excitement about this appeal because there is not going to be any person, any parishioner, any donor, any volunteer who just does things the way we did it last year.
Right.
Every volunteer act, every phone call, ultimately every donation will be a thought out, measured, generous response to a difficult situation. Oftentimes from people who are hurting themselves, who have lost income, who have lost some of their savings account, who are nervous. If they're older people, maybe it's their kids who are suffering, different things, and yet they are making the decision to support the mission of the church. And the volunteers who have so much else they could be doing are focusing on the mission of the church through this appeal. And that is exciting, regardless of the financial outcome. The fact that people are making this kind of conscious, generous decision, to me, is very energizing. And I think as a result, again, regardless of what the final numbers say, good things will come because of this, because people are making generous decisions.
I couldn't say anything more than that, so I'm going to leave that there. Thank you so much for your time today, Brian.
Well, it's good to be with you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this. The one thing I would add, if I may, in a minute, is that the world, when they look at the church, they see a lot of problems. They see scandals. They see fallen people who make mistakes. And sorry about that. And what we can show them through this, they don't see the church. They don't see the Eucharist. They don't see Christ in His church the way we do. And but when we can do the good works of the church as a group, when we come together in this way to do the good works of the church, we make the invisible body of Christ, which is present in His church, visible to people in a way the world can understand. So ultimately, that's the mission, is to bring Christ's love into people, into the world. And I am just deeply grateful to everybody who supports this mission. Thank you.
Thank you.